Hey, it's Emma Chamberlain. I designed these new glasses for Warby Parker and I basically can't take them off. Like, I'm showering in them and sleeping in them. They're just that good. Go see them all at warbyparker.com. And you know what? Have a good day too. Okay? All right? Bye.
What if you could hear your favorite song for the first time again? Introducing the all-new, reimagined Nissan Kicks. With an available Bose Personal Plus sound system that uses speakers in the headrest to create a 360-degree listening experience. You've never heard anything like this. Reimagine your music and your drive. Experience the all-new, reimagined Nissan Kicks for yourself at nissanusa.com today.
Available feature. Bose is a registered trademark of the Bose Corporation.
This is Optimal Work Daily. You just have to grab the next trapeze. A former lawyer reinvents himself after escaping to France. By Bill Crow with chrisguillebeau.com. It doesn't matter how old you are or how far along you are in your career, there's still time for change. Bill Crow felt like he was living someone else's life. Even though it was a very successful lawyer's life, he still wasn't happy. So he took a year off and moved his family to France. Disconnecting from his everyday world allowed him to discover what he really wanted to do next. Here's his story. I went to law school because it led to the professional career expected of me by my engineer father. I had a lawyer's dream job in my home office in Vancouver, Canada. I had my own law practice, negotiating contracts on the phone for international clients. Best of all, there was no overhead, and I was able to pocket every dollar I billed. I loved almost everything about my job. The low hours, the freedom, the money, being able to spend time with my kids, the praise of my clients, and the work-from-home dress code, PJs. The only thing I didn't like about my job was the actual doing of it. Practicing law was like sticking needles in my eyes. I had achieved what society demanded of me, but was consumed by doubts, regret, and guilt. I felt like an imposter and fantasized daily about abandoning my career. I had no business being unhappy, and I felt like a jerk for not wanting what everyone else wanted. I wasn't the only guy in his 50s living a quiet working life of screaming hopelessness, but I sure felt like it. Finding the quest. In the beginning, I was simply focused on escaping my lawyer life. After several years of soul-searching, I put my fears aside and agreed to spend 1 year in the south of France with my family. I was elated at the prospect of a long vacation, but at the same time, I was still nervous and worried about what other people would think of me. Unexpectedly, France became the filter through which I evaluated my profession, my relationship with my family, and my life. Chugging rosé on the patio of my rented country home, haunting cafes, or biking through Cézanne landscapes, I questioned society's definition of success and the path to happiness. Even though I didn't know it at the time, my quest was to let go of my ego and income and be true to myself by finding what I was really meant to do. Enjoying the journey, learning from the failures. Once I moved to France, I started to contemplate goals bigger than escape. I dreamt of leading a creative life. I've loved cartooning my whole life, so I thought if I could design a comic strip for newspaper syndication, I would be able to feed my creative desires and practice law only part-time. I thought that would make me happier. I worked for months in France putting together 50 comic strips and sent them to the major newspaper syndicates, as well as a very famous cartoonist who I had emailed for advice. My comic strip was rejected by all the syndicates, and the famous cartoonist provided me a long list of reasons why my comic strip wasn't marketable. I was crushed. But this failure taught me something. I realized that during the process of creating the comic strip, I was the happiest I'd been maybe ever. So even though the comic strip didn't work, I could do something else creative. So I started writing articles which I planned to sell to widely circulated magazines. That also ended in rejection from every magazine that bothered to respond. Again, the writing process was a happy experience, it just didn't work out the way I planned. It was after this failure that I realized I was only acting in half measures, not going for it. I finally admitted to myself that what I always wanted, deep down, was to write books. I realized the only way to do it was to fully commit and quit law for good. This was a difficult and painful decision. I was giving up a 25-year career, a steady income, and my lawyer persona, and I was doing this for the writing profession, one which I knew nothing about except that most people fail at it. Unburdened by society's expectations. What surprised me was the depth of my elation the day my wife and I sat at an outdoor cafe in Aix-en-Provence and made the joint decision that from that point on I would never be a lawyer again. Of course I was happy. Who wouldn't be happy to shed a job they hated for 25 years? But it was more than that. It was like a monumental gorilla had jumped off my back, dragged his knuckles across the cobblestones, and disappeared down an alley. I knew he was watching in case I changed my mind, but I was determined I wouldn't let him. I knew what I was doing was risky and impractical, but honestly, I didn't care. Grabbing the next trapeze. Years ago, I was at a Vancouver bistro talking to a friend about changing jobs and maybe even professions. My friend Sharka questioned the need to do something so drastic since it seemed to her that I had always liked my job. I listed the things I didn't like about my job. Dismissively, I talked about wanting to be a writer or an artist, but how that probably wouldn't work. What Sharka said stuck with me. Quote, "It sounds like you want a big change but already decided you can't have it. Making a big change is about making space for yourself. Life is like being on a trapeze. You have to let go of the first trapeze to get the next one. For a split second, you're not holding on to anything. You're suspended in midair and you could fall. You trust the next trapeze will be there when you need it. Once you grab the second trapeze, it's clear sailing. So if you don't want to do law anymore, don't. Just let go." End quote. I should have listened to Sharka years ago and saved myself much torture, but I needed that time away from my lawyer life, complete separation from that world, to have the space to think clearly. That's what France gave me. Disconnected from the familiar business world, hovering in midair and risking a fall, I was excited to grasp the next trapeze. I just had to let go. You just listened to the post titled, "You Just Have to Grab the Next Trapeze. A Former Lawyer Reinvents Himself After Escaping to France," by Bill Crow with Guillebeau.com. We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search. Match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging. 93% of employers agree. Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites. One of the things I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy because Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/startup. Just go to Indeed.com/startup right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/startup. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
This episode is brought to you by Google Gemini. With the Gemini app, you can talk live and have a real-time conversation with an AI assistant. It's great for all kinds of things, like if you want to practice for an upcoming interview, ask for advice on things to do in a new city, or brainstorm creative ideas. And by the way, this script was actually read by Gemini. Download the Gemini app for iOS and Android today. Must be 18 plus to use Gemini Live.
And thank you to both Chris and Bill for today's post. This one was actually a reader profile. On Chris's site, you can nominate someone to be featured, and Bill was picked to share his story. He says if just one of his readers decides to quit their boring job, the one their parents and society said would bring security and happiness, then he will have achieved his goal as a writer. Maybe that's you. His site is williamcrowwriter.com. It's a really neat-looking site, definitely worth checking out, and you can find his books there along with his blog, speeches, even videos, and much more. So check it out. Again, that's williamcrowwriter.com, and come by chrisguillebeau.com for more reader profiles and to nominate someone to be featured. But I think that about does it for today. I thank you so much for joining me. Have a happy Thursday, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow in the Friday show, where your optimal life awaits.